You ever feel yourself evaporate, like you're present in name only, like a placeholder in your own life? That's what that text did to me. I stared at my phone screen, watching the 3 lines of cheerful betrayal blink back at me. The emoji at the end, that damn smiley face, was the cherry on top. A saccharine little symbol pretending this wasn't a slap in the face wrapped in a throw pillow. Rachel and her fiancé, my room, my bed, my dresser where my old high school medals still sat tangled in cheap chains. My bookshelf, lined with the tattered covers of novels I used to reread every winter break. All of it, swept aside for a cousin I barely knew, someone who once asked me if Vermont was in Canada. But she was engaged now, and apparently that elevated her to guest of honor status. Me? I was just the spare daughter. I sat there for a while, phone in hand, heart thudding like it wanted out. I wasn't even angry at first. It was this heavy, dull ache. Like something inside me just quietly cracked. I had always known I was the dependable one. The one who didn't stir the pot, who remembered everyone's allergies when cooking, who picked thoughtful gifts and never missed a flight home. But this was the first time they didn't even bother to pretend I mattered. And of course, it wasn't just about the room. It was about every Christmas before this one. Every time I watched my brother Kyle get praised for microwaving a bowl of green beans, while my 3 hours of roasting and basting got a dismissive, "Smells nice, honey." Every time Rachel popped in for 20 minutes and got swarmed with compliments for simply existing in a new haircut or coat, while I stood in the corner with dish soap still on my hands. Every time I'd carefully planned matching family pajamas, only for Mom to forget to wear hers, then roll her eyes when I looked disappointed. This time they didn't even pretend, they didn't ask, they told, like it was obvious, like it was the most natural thing in the world for their daughter to sleep on a sunken, squeaky futon in a room that smelled like the dog's chew toys, while Rachel enjoyed the memory foam mattress I'd saved for over a year to buy them one Christmas. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could have said so many things. "Are you serious?" Or, "Thanks for the heads up." I could have pushed back, asked why I was less important, but I knew the tone that would follow. The faux hurt in Mom's voice, the passive-aggressive sighs, the "Jenna, why do you always have to make everything difficult?" The guilt trip packed in a snow globe. So I wrote the coward's reply. "Sounds good." And immediately hated myself for it. That one message was the sum of years of swallowing disappointment like cough syrup, bitter, necessary, and silent. But something shifted after I hit send. I could feel it, something old and dormant, stretching awake inside me. A quiet decision, not fully formed, but pulsing. This Christmas was going to be different. One way or another, there's a specific kind of pain that comes from being politely discarded. It's not loud. It doesn't scream or throw things. It just settles in quietly, like frost creeping along the corners of a window, and before you know it, you're numb. The futon was exactly how I remembered it. Lumpy, sunken in the middle, a graveyard for every spring that had given up over the past decade. It creaked like it was complaining under my weight, as if even it didn't want me there. The air in the den was sharp, cold enough to see your breath if you sat still long enough. There was no vent, no insulation, just a thin old throw blanket and a pillow that smelled faintly of dog hair and lemon pledge. I stood in the doorway for a moment before setting my bag down, trying to swallow the rising burn behind my eyes. Upstairs, I could hear laughter, bright and carefree. Rachel's laugh cut through the rest like a blade, high-pitched and obnoxious, as if it had never occurred to her to be embarrassed about taking someone else's space. My space. When I walked past the guest room, my room on the way in, I didn't recognize it. The walls were the same soft gray I painted the summer after college, and the bookshelf still stood by the window, but everything else was gone. My framed photo from graduation, the one where I was holding my diploma and my parents were smiling like they actually noticed me, was missing. In its place was a designer purse and a curling iron sitting on the dresser, surrounded by half-used Sephora products. The scent of someone else's perfume lingered in the hallway like an unwelcome reminder that I'd been erased. I'd asked, gently, cautiously, if I could at least keep my suitcase in the guest room. Not stay there, not move in, just store my things where they wouldn't freeze. But Mom didn't even turn around. She was busy brushing crumbs off the kitchen island, like the conversation didn't merit eye contact. "Oh honey, that's Rachel's space now," she said in that tone she uses when I've done something terribly inconvenient, like exist. "Just use the coat closet in the hallway." The coat closet, the one with the broken door that sticks, the one that already held 6 winter jackets, a vacuum cleaner, and 2 plastic bins labeled Xmas junk. And Dad? He just shrugged, flipping through the newspaper like he hadn't heard a word. It's only for a few nights. No big deal. But it was a big deal. It wasn't just about the sleeping arrangement. It was about every subtle dismissal that had come before it. Every time they assumed I'd be fine with less. Every time I'd been the helper, the cleaner, the errand runner. Every time they forgot I was someone with her own needs, her own voice. That night, I curled up on the futon in a ball so tight my muscles ached, trying to find warmth where there wasn't any. The ceiling above creaked as footsteps moved across it. Laughter floated down like dust. At one point, I heard Rachel say, "Wait, this used to be Jenna's room," followed by more laughter. And I just laid there, my body still, my face turned toward the wall. That was the moment it hit me, not like a punch, but like a quiet, sharp needle sliding beneath the skin. I wasn't a guest here. I wasn't even family. I was just an afterthought, a convenient placeholder until someone shinier came along. And maybe I always had been. The air was sharp and unfiltered as I stepped out into the morning cold, my boots crunching through the thin crust of snow that had settled overnight. The sky was a dull pewter gray, heavy with unspoken words, just like the house I left behind. I didn't slam the door. I didn't announce my departure or scribble a passive-aggressive note on the fridge like a sitcom character. I just zipped my coat, picked up my bag, and slipped out as quietly as I had arrived, as if I were a ghost finally accepting that I wasn't meant to haunt that house anymore. My breath fogged the windshield as I waited for the car to heat up. My fingers, numb through my gloves, fumbled with the GPS. I had bookmarked the listing the night before in a fit of insomnia and spite. It wasn't just a place to stay. It was a monument to the life I knew I deserved, if only for a day. A castle. A literal stone castle tucked away in the northern hills, with ivy-stained turrets, stained glass windows, and fireplaces in every room. A relic from another time that had been reborn as an heirloom, waiting for someone reckless or brave enough to claim it. The roads were mostly empty. Christmas morning silence blanketed the landscape, broken only by the occasional shimmer of tire tracks and the hush of wind curling through the trees. I drove in that kind of stillness that feels sacred, a hush that lets your mind unravel its knots. I didn't cry. I didn't even seethe. I just stared straight ahead as miles of forest and frozen lakes blurred past, white and untouched, like fresh parchment. I had spent years showing up, birthdays, Thanksgivings, holidays, always arriving early, always staying late. I never asked for much. I thought that was what made me a good daughter. But that morning, as the sun fractured through bare branches and spilled gold across the snow, I realized I hadn't been asking for anything at all. Not space, not respect, not even a proper place to sleep. I had been grateful just to be included, like a stray dog thankful for scraps. 2 hours later, I turned off the main road and wound through a narrow, snow-draped drive lined with evergreens, and there it was. The castle rose from the trees like something pulled out of a fairy tale and dusted with frost. Thick stone walls etched with age, arched windows glowing from within, and a tall iron gate that creaked open as I approached. The main entrance loomed, double wooden doors with black wrought iron hinges. A small wreath hung crookedly from one side, and I couldn't help but laugh, a real laugh for the first time in days. Inside, it was warm and golden, not just from the roaring fire in the main hearth, but from the quiet dignity of a space that hadn't forgotten how to welcome someone. Velvet drapes framed tall windows. The chandeliers cast soft halos on the hardwood floors. Every inch of the castle felt like a whispered affirmation. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to want more. I set down my bag, pulled off my gloves, and took in a deep breath of air that smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. Then, with hands still tingling from the cold, I opened the family group chat. Something came up. Won't make Christmas dinner. Enjoy the couch. And after a pause, I sent the castle's location. Just the address. No context. Then one more message. If you want to visit, dress warm. And I meant it, because for the first time, I wasn't bracing for their approval. I wasn't waiting to be invited into the warmth. I had made my own. The sky had already begun to bruise with the deepening shades of winter dusk when I heard it. Slow, deliberate tires crunching over compacted snow. The kind of sound that breaks silence with purpose. I set down the leather-bound book I had been pretending to read by the fire and moved toward the tall, arched window framed with frost-dusted drapes. The view outside looked like a Renaissance painting, Gray sky fading to indigo, snow swirling lightly like sifted sugar over the stone courtyard. And there they were. 5 silhouettes bundled in layers that clearly weren't warm enough, Mom in her outdated down coat with the faux fur collar, Dad hunched into his scarf like he was dodging the wind rather than confronting it. Rachel, predictably, wore a coat that was more fashion than function, cream-colored, belted, entirely impractical, and her fiancé, whose name I still hadn't bothered to remember, clutched a foil-covered casserole dish like it might thaw his frozen fingers. My brother Kyle stood behind them with his hands in his pockets, expression unreadable, the kind of blank mask he'd mastered in our family long ago. None of them knocked. They just stood there, waiting, shivering, clutching gifts and half-smiles as if the cold would excuse everything. I didn't move. I let the weight of the moment settle on my chest like a heavy cloak. 10 full minutes ticked by. I watched them shift from one foot to the other, try the doorbell. It didn't work. I'd unplugged it, murmur among themselves with increasing discomfort. Finally, I walked, slowly, deliberately, to the massive oak door. I adjusted the silk tie on my robe, straightened the delicate chain around my neck, and picked up the glass of Cabernet I'd poured exactly for this moment. My hand wrapped around the brass handle, smooth and cold. One breath in. Then I opened the door. The warmth from the hearth behind me poured out in a golden wave. The cold hit their faces harder now, made red by wind and the flush of awkward realization. Rachel blinked first. "Is this where you're staying?" Her tone teetered between awe and offense, her teeth already chattering beneath her lip gloss. I let my eyes travel over each of them before answering. "Yeah, figured I'd book something a little more fitting for someone who didn't have a bed." The silence was beautiful, thick, charged. Mom tried to recover first. "Jenna, sweetheart, we didn't mean to offend you. We just thought." "You thought I'd take whatever was left," I said, my voice even not sharp, but unmovable. Again. Dad let out a weak chuckle, like this was all just a misunderstanding we'd laugh about over cocoa. "It's Christmas," he said. "You're still our girl." But I wasn't. Not anymore. Not in the way they expected. I didn't belong in that hierarchy of convenience and conditional affection. I looked at them one last time, red noses, gift bags swinging awkwardly from gloved hands, the casserole starting to steam through its foil. I smiled. Then I closed the door. Not with a slam, not with anger, just with finality. And for the first time in years, the click of the lock didn't feel like exile. It felt like peace. The flames danced in the hearth like they knew they were being watched. They crackled and glowed, casting amber shadows across the stone walls and flickering over the edges of the carved wooden mantel that looked like it had witnessed centuries of whispered confessions and secret toasts. I sat cross-legged on a velvet chaise in front of it, wrapped in the shimmer of my silk pajama set, a gift to myself, for once, with no justification required. No clearance rack. No, maybe later. Just indulgence, pure and unapologetic. The food arrived in silence, like magic. The chef, a man named Olivier with a polite nod and a discreet uniform, brought in each course with care, setting them on silver trays that gleamed against the firelight. The steak was seared to perfection, rich, tender, seasoned with herbs that reminded me of some quiet countryside in France I'd never visited, but had always imagined walking through. The roasted potatoes were golden and crisp at the edges, soft at the center, dusted with rosemary and sea salt. The crème brûlée cracked beneath the tip of my spoon with a satisfying snap, revealing a silky custard underneath that melted on my tongue with quiet decadence. No one interrupted me. No one asked if I was sure I wanted to eat alone. No one teased me for how I held my fork or asked passive-aggressively if I was really going to finish all of that. It was just me, and silence, and warmth, and luxury that didn't have to be explained or defended. Later, I wandered the halls of the estate barefoot, the thick rugs muffling each step, trailing my fingers along the cool stone of the walls. The chandeliers overhead twinkled like constellations. Every room I passed through felt like a page from a novel I'd once been told was too ambitious to write, too bold, too much. But here I was, living inside of it, existing without apology. When I finally climbed into bed, it felt like the world itself had softened. The four-poster frame was carved from dark wood, ornate and regal, but it was the down comforter, cloud-like, impossibly warm, that cradled me into sleep. I lay back against the pillows and stared up at the ceiling, watching the firelight flicker against the beams, listening to nothing but the hush of wind outside and the crackle of peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the creak of footsteps in the hallway, or the sound of Rachel's piercing laugh through paper-thin walls, or the distant judgment in my mother's voice as she reminded me again of how I'd changed. There was no cinnamon roll smoke wafting in. No clatter of dishes at 7 a.m., no obligation. No compromise. I woke the next morning and didn't reach for my phone. Didn't wonder who needed me or what version of myself I was expected to perform. I just breathed. I lay still beneath the weight of that perfect blanket and realized what that feeling was. It was freedom. Not the dramatic kind with fireworks or declarations, just the quiet kind, earned, chosen, mine. The kind that comes when you stop begging to be noticed and start noticing yourself. Because here's the truth they never taught me at home. You don't have to shrink to fit into someone else's mold. You don't have to accept scraps because that's all you've ever been handed. You don't have to ask permission to be seen or heard or held. You can build your own space, your own rules, your own castle. And if they want to come knocking, let them stand in the snow.